Welcome to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. Coming up on today's show, Thom Hartmann is going to be here to tell us how we can avoid the next big economic crash, because it is coming. And economic crashes, limited access to health care, constant wars, inept politicians, America's starting to resemble a banana republic. We'll tell you why. And the attacks on the Affordable Care Act keep coming. We'll be looking at how the insurance industry is funding those attacks. We have all that and more coming up, but right now, just remember you've stepped in to the Ring of Fire.
You can't change Washington from the inside. You can only change it from the outside.
Grand jury secrecy rules.
For political gain.
The press can find out.
That has nothing to do with politics, but go ahead.
It wouldn't bother me.
Oops.
5 years ago, Lehman Brothers was the first U.S. bank to collapse. It ushered in financial meltdowns for this economy. Very little has changed since then, and it's only a matter of time until the next crash. Joining me now to talk about how we can avoid the next crash is TV and radio host Thom Hartmann. Thom, you've been writing an awful lot about the possibilities of what could happen just in years to come with the possibility of another crash, economic crash. What are the elements of what we went through that you think are important in trying to figure out what might lie ahead? How does the past help us?
Yeah, well, the past, there's two real significant pieces to the past. The first is that back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, there was really a takeover, a significant takeover of our intellectual systems of our colleges. Most economics courses now are being taught by right-wing professors. They're being funded by people like the Koch brothers. There was a takeover of our court system through the Federalist Society and other right-wing supported groups. There's been a takeover of our legislature. There's been a takeover of our media. So these story narratives that the billionaires can do no wrong, that the banksters are always right, that if there's anything, any blame for example, the crash of 2008, that it must be in Jimmy Carter's lap, for saying that banks can't redline neighborhoods. So there's that part. And then the more immediate, more recent part happened in 1999 and 2000, the last 2 years of the Clinton administration. And this was back then Ken Lay, who is running Enron, wanted very, very much to A, get into the banking business, and B, start trading derivatives based on energy futures. He wanted to be able to trade them in an absolutely unregulated environment and do it worldwide, with Enron. And with regard to setting up banks, he wanted to be able to have not only a bank, but he also wanted to be able to gamble with that bank. So member of his board of directors was Wendy Graham. Her husband was Republican Senator Phil Graham. And Phil Graham in 1999 and 2000 proposed, and then Congress passed and Clinton signed into law, two pieces of legislation that basically ripped the guts out of the New Deal, out of the 1935 protections against banksters. The first was Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which blew up Glass-Steagall, which said that checkbook banks and gambling institutions like Merrill Lynch used to be had to be completely separate institutions, that you could have a brokerage account and trade stocks, but you can't do your checking there. You can have a checking account, savings account, but that bank can't gamble in the stock market, especially with your money, but they can't gamble at all. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley bill blew that up and said these banks can merge, or any one of these investment banks or commercial banks can get in each other's business. Then the second was the Commodities Futures Modernization Act. And what this did is it said, it used to be in the early days that if you wanted to, if you had farmers who were growing wheat and bakers who needed to buy wheat, they wanted to have some way of covering the risk. The farmers were concerned about having a bad crop year. The bakers were concerned about, a bad crop year driving the price of wheat up to the point that they'd go out of business. And so a futures market was created where the farmers could cut a deal with the bakers even before they planted the wheat for this year's crop, that said that we guarantee that we'll sell you a certain amount, and typically it was 20 to 50% of their crop. We'll sell you a certain amount at a fixed price right now. We're both going to bet on whether or not it's going to be a good year.
Okay, let me stop you right here. And so,
Yeah.
Thom, the shift that took place at that point, it was almost a mental shift that our entire economic process engaged in. And that is, we no longer make things at this point. We no longer build things. We don't make cars. The manufacturing industry was not that important. The things we sold around the world were not that important. But these things, this paper that we create on Wall Street then became the major focus of who we were. It became more of an identity than the fact that we build cars. That was a pivotal point, wasn't it?
Yeah. To make the point very quickly, these derivatives became legal with the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, and we went from a zero market in them in 1998 to $900 trillion, according to the Bank for International Settlements, in 2008. Today, that market is $600 trillion. Keep in mind, the GDP of the entire planet is only $65 trillion. GDP of the United States is $15 trillion. There's $600 trillion worth of these bets on bets on bets out there, much of it held by U.S. banks, about $200 trillion of it. And it is a time bomb waiting to go off. You originally said, a crash or another crash. I would say to you, Mike, that we are still in the crash.
Okay, we haven't pulled out. It's not like this is still coming. The reason we might not recognize we're still in the crash is why?
Well, because they've basically been papering it over with paper mache and bubble gum and Scotch tape. There has been just enough, small amount of government stimulus to put enough people back to work with the original Stimulus Act when President Obama came into office to get us to positive levels of employment and reduce our unemployment somewhat. But when you look at the numbers, they're truly breathtaking. The consumer debt in the United States from the time Reagan came into office until today has gone up 1,700%. Total home mortgage debt is 5 times greater than it was just 20 years ago. Student loan debt's over $1 trillion. It was almost unheard of when Reagan came into office. Very few people had student loans. 46.2 million Americans are living in poverty. 25 million Americans, adults, are living with their parents. So, people know that things are bad. We refer to it as a Great Recession. The president talked about it, this week. But because the stock market hasn't crashed, because the billionaires are doing really well, the financial news seems to have all this happy talk because they're, of course, talking to the billionaires in the stock market and the rich folks. But working people, I would say, if you went out and talked to them, they'd say, no, we're in tough times. A little known fact, the phrase the Great Depression didn't come about until the late 30s, early 40s. Throughout the Great Depression, people didn't refer to it typically as the Great Depression. It wasn't until afterwards they looked back that they realized how bad things really were. I think that's going to be the case again.
First of all, let me go back and kind of construct some of the parts of all this. Why are we here? Okay, well, you lay out kind of those major pivots, but in those major pivots, it's important to understand that who participated. The fact that you had credit rating agencies that participated in creating lies so they could be paid, so Wall Street bankers could sell these things called synthetics and CDOs and swaps. You had that taking place. You had the SEC who was being told this is falling apart. You had the Department of Justice that was being told, you really need to pay attention to this. But you had Republicans and Democrats that say, you know what, this is a new era. This is a new era where government no longer has any say in how we run our lives. And this very time that we're talking about was the definition of that, wasn't it? So all of those parts had to come together, didn't it, in order for us to get where we are. And you point out the Great Recession is not over. We're still in it, but the ending is just right around the corner.
Yeah, and in a very real way, it's history repeating itself. In 2000, Warren Harding ran on the pledge of less government in business, more business in government, and they kicked off the Roaring '20s. And for 9 years, everybody thought, hey, cool, less government, more business, seems to work great. And then 1929 came. Ronald Reagan came along and promised basically the same thing. Clinton delivered on it with these 2 pieces of legislation I mentioned, and into the gap that was created by those 2 bills, principally this huge deregulated gap, stepped the Jamie Dimons of the world, the Lloyd Blankfeins of the world, these major banksters, these guys who controlled not just billions or trillion or millions or billions, but literally trillions of dollars, and they stepped into this unregulated gap. And You know, we had, because of the New Deal, for 70 years, we had a very stable home mortgage market. The problem that created was that there wasn't a huge boom in new mortgages being written.
It was steady. It was steady, but no big boom.
That's right. But they had figured out a way to take literally a $100,000 home mortgage and make about $40 million on it by selling bets on bets on bets and bets and bets. And so they needed as many of these things as they could get. So once it was deregulated in 99 and 2000, they said to the mortgage lenders, we don't care if people can pay these things back because, you know, we're not going to make our money when they're paid back. We're going to make our money when we sell the derivatives. So you had this entire industry based on fraud, based on lies, as you point out, based on fraud, that from the loan originators to the banks that were bundling the loans and selling them, to the big banks that were then selling the derivatives based on those mortgages, to tragically, the countries, the pension funds, the individuals who bought these toxic, quote, toxic assets.
Right.
And it all went down.
Okay, well, let me move you now to in about a minute and a half. It's all gone bad. Government gets involved. We have this thing called quantitative easing, which is completely crazy scam.
That's part of the paper mache.
That's part of the paper mache. We have TARP, that none of the money really went to people that would have really injected energy into this economy from the bottom. It all went to the top, and we saw the CEOs paying themselves big bonuses, and now evolving into what? What has it evolved into now? Even though government was supposed to have laid its hands on the problem, said we have this under control, even though we have corporate media saying, you know, this will never happen again, that is completely an outrageous statement coming from corporate media.
We have an oligarchy now, and you know well that this is a consequence of Citizens United to a large extent, and a kleptocracy. These banksters, who, by the way, are 10 times larger than they were when Reagan came into office, 3 times larger than they were when Clinton came into office. These banksters basically are now running the world, and they're just stealing everything they can get. Barney Frank's question the other day, why are they paid so much? It's because they're a little, they're this tight little boys club, and they own everything.
So as we go forward, what's going to be the next signal in about 30 seconds? What should we be looking for?
It is going to take a huge crash to genuinely wake up America and to force action and to put the clear lie to the ideas that have been promulgated by the banksters and their shills about who's responsible and how. And, I expect that's probably going to happen in the next couple of years. It could even be the next couple of months. But I think that they've got enough baling wire and paper mache to run it a couple of years. So it'll probably, will probably happen around 2016.
Thom Hartmann, thank you for joining me. Appreciate it. Coming up, we'll find out if America's finally become a banana republic. I'm Mike Papantonio. We'll be right back with more Ring of Fire.
You're watching Free Speech TV, a network powered by the people.
Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. The United States has fallen a long way in recent years. We're shipping our jobs overseas, denying health care to the needy, and we're constantly looking for a new war. The closer you look, it becomes clearer that we're headed down a path of becoming a banana republic. Joining me now to talk about this new banana republic is Mike Burg. Mike, many writers right now describing the state of the United States as kind of the emerging banana republic. And there's almost a checklist that each one of the writers use when they start saying, here are the features of what a banana republic looks like. They say in order to have a vibrant, kind of one of those Americas that Obama and so many people like to call the exceptional America, certain things have to happen. You have to have a living wage. You have to have a robust middle class. You have to have a heavy unionization that protects the middle class worker, strong manufacturing, upward mobility, white collars and blue collar jobs. It's very different from what we're seeing in the United States right now, isn't it?
Absolutely. The American dream, Mike, you and I are people that rose ourselves up in the American dream, but today it's almost impossible. Today we have the wealthy is creating more wealth than ever before, a shrinking middle class. Labor unions are no longer really a vibrant part of the society. As you know, the top 1% in 1976 earned only 9% of the total income throughout the United States. In a short period of time, in 2011, that same 1% earned over 20%.
So what we have happening is if we listen to these writers, great sociologists, great economists, one writer, Alex Henderson, did a great article on alternate and said, listen, you know what? There's some things in common with what a banana republic looks like. They talked about the Dominican Republic. They said, you know, first of all, yes, the Dominican Republic had this horrible dictator ruling the country, but the problem wasn't just the dictator. The dictator was that there was this merger that took place between the corporations in that country and government, to where you couldn't distinguish the difference. There was this merger between media in the government that you couldn't tell the difference. Same thing could be said of Nicaragua. You had Somoza dynasty down there that was a disaster for Nicaragua. But again, it wasn't just the dictator, it was the elements of what was occurring that made that into a banana republic. And two, the big thing was the merger between corporate and government, and obviously corporate and media. That became very important. What, if you're just going through kind of a checklist of some of the issues that we need to be aware of, what are they just generally?
Well, the one you just mentioned is really foremost. I mean, you know, go back even to Mussolini, that's what happened. The government controlled the media. I mean, the big business controlled the media and the government. They were all put into one. We also have corruption in the police force. We see that in the United States. Torture. We've now condoned torture, which is what happens in banana republics. We have the highest rate of people incarcerated in the United States. We have 176 people out of 100,000 are incarcerated.
How does that compare? Just Mike, how does 716 people per 100,000? The numbers that I'm looking at, the comparison would be that, for example, in Germany, it's 79 people per 100,000. I mean, the numbers are crazy. Netherlands, 67 people per 100,000. And we are at 716 people per 100,000. Now, the reason that's important is every time you see an article or an analysis of how does a banana republic emerge, this is one of the things they talk about. The other thing may be the idea that you create almost a police state. Aren't we seeing kind of this unchecked police corruption taking place in the United States? This ever-expanding police state that Chris Hedges talked about. I think Alex Henderson talked about Chris Hedges discussing this expanding police state. Isn't that another?
Absolutely. 716, and I apologize, I think I said 176. 716 for 100,000. And the other thing that's happening is that prisons are being run by big corporations. It's becoming a business to put people in jail. There was a juvenile court in Pennsylvania. 3 judges took bribes, over $1 million. And to put young kids into jail, even if they had minor offenses. And so, yes, this is what happens in a banana republic.
How about income inequality? Don't we see that here? How do you, if you look at what's happening with income inequality, there has to be some hope, doesn't there, Mike? There has to be hope for somebody living in a middle-class setting or below, that they can be upwardly mobile. When you analyze what happens in a banana republic, you don't have that chance for upward mobility, do you?
And that's what's happening in the United States. People don't have that opportunity to move up. You know, we were fortunate. We had that opportunity. Generations before us had that opportunity. But now, because of the low wages, the high unemployment, the excessive cost to go to college, right now there is more money spent on student loans than there is in credit card debt, which can't be even repaid. And then when people get out of college, there's no jobs. So they don't have that upward mobility that you've had in our society for generations and generations.
Well, but when you drill down on income inequality, I mean, almost the stereotype for a banana republic is that you have the ultra-rich minority that dominates both, you know, whether it's political, whether it's media, whether it's certainly economic. They dominate a poor majority, a non-existent middle class. Starts, you know, that's where you start saying, okay, now the features of a true banana republic are coming into place here. So we have a list that we can go down. We can look at dramatic gaps in life expectancy. Isn't that one thing that you look at when you say, how is that country doing? Where are we there?
You know, It's amazing. In some of the smaller communities in West Virginia where the poor are there, the average life expectancy for a male is 63.7. In other communities, there's one poor community in Virginia, the average life expectancy for a male, 67. And you take that where the wealthy, they're living way beyond that, 78. And so there's the inequality that's occurring. We also have poor health care or no health care for the poor. We're in a country, one of the only civilized countries in the world, where there is no health care for the poor, for people who, and we have a highest infant mortality rate. The country is just, unfortunately, the list goes on and on and on.
Well, I mean, one thing, for example, the lack of health care, one thing that you look at in a banana republic or an emerging banana republic is you look at what is the infant mortality. That's one of the keys. They say, okay, here's the infant mortality. We fall right into something that looks like a banana republic. How about high unemployment? Isn't that one of the factors? You know, right now you have this administration bragging about 7% unemployment. No, if you take a look at the real statistics on that, you've had statistician after statistician saying if you really drill down, you're talking about something as high as 23% unemployment. And that's when you start adding in the people who have simply just given up. So that unemployment factor is also one of the things that you would consider when you're taking a look at this whole thing. What would you add to that, Mike? What would you add to the list?
I would add hunger and malnutrition. We have more malnutrition of children in this country than ever before. 1 out of every 7 families is on food stamps. And now, of course, people want to take away the food stamp, and so these people are just going to starve to death. This is what's going on in this country. We are an emerging banana republic, and that's one of the things you look at. You have that high unemployment, you have no jobs, and you have people who basically can't get health care. It's really deplorable.
We heard the president talking about American exceptionalism as we're involved in the Syrian debate, but when you really drill down on this story, it's anything but an exceptional America compared to where we were even 40 years ago. What is your take on what's happened in the last 4 or 5 decades? How have we moved through this point to where you have serious sociologists, serious economists writing and saying, have we become or are we on our way to becoming a banana republic? What is your take on that?
My take is, you know what, unfortunately, it looks like the American dream is dying. Horatio Alger is no longer going to be involved. People can't move up. People can't be successful. The reason people came to America was they had opportunity. That opportunity is fading because the richest corporations in the United States are mandating that the rich get richer and the poor be left behind.
And if we look at what's happened, even from the last burn down, that some people say the burn down's not even over, we've really made no corrections. The last numbers I saw, all the TARP money, for example, that we gave to the biggest banks have only made them bigger. We haven't held them responsible. Now it's fewer banks with more money dictating political policy, dictating social policy, dictating economic policy. And until you make a shift away from that very top, the prospects of that day again, when we can say, yes, American exceptionalism is alive and well, we are in no threat of becoming a banana republic, until we can make that pivot, aren't you fearful?
I'm very fearful for my children and my grandchildren, and quite frankly, I'm a dedicated American just like you, Mike, and I'm fearful for our country because we've lost what made us exceptional.
Well, this story is, there are writers right now saying that the big burn down, the economic burn down is not over, that we're still in the throes of it, and expect something by 2016 that could be substantial, just kind of the period, the very exclamation point to the end of this story. Michael Burg, thank you for joining me, okay? Coming up, we'll find out who's funding the attacks on the Affordable Health Care Act. We'll be right back with more Ring of Fire. Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, host of Ring of Fire on Free Speech TV. The corporate-controlled media rakes in millions of dollars in profit every year by only telling you half of the story. They're at the mercy of their corporate sponsors, and they refuse to take on corporations that kill, maim, and harm consumers. Here at Free Speech TV, we don't have shareholders. We don't answer to corporate America, and we don't pull any punches. Our loyalty is to the viewers, and our viewers are the ones that help keep Free Speech TV alive. Free Speech TV doesn't take corporate money, and that's why your financial support is so important to us. Viewer voices, not corporate sponsors, fuel Free Speech TV and drive many of our programming decisions. You can help protect Free Speech TV with your donation. Free Speech TV airs independent news and views for independent thinkers like you. Our people-powered programs demonstrate what's possible in our democracy when we unite as workers, as students, as artists, as parents, and partners in progress. More people means more power. Each donation brings more power and programs and more possibilities for change. Our programming equips viewers with vital tools, resources, contacts, and examples of how to collectively build alternative, sustainable solutions to serious community problems. Please donate now and bring these organizing tools into your community. Everyone should have access to news and information that's forming the world around them. Our goal is to keep you and everybody involved. We aim to reach every viewer possible because we're all in this together. Go online to freespeech.org and help support independent, honest news journalism. Your support helps keep information flowing, and together we can hold the corporate media more accountable. Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. The Tea Party spent the entire summer rallying against Obamacare, but like always, corporate interests were pulling the strings. Join me now to talk about what's really behind the push to dismantle health care reform is Cliff Schecter, author of Real McCain. Cliff, the battle of ideology, man, are we seeing it with the Obamacare fight. It is that age-old battle of one side not wanting any government at all unless they need it, isn't it? How do you see this story developing?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's completely split the Republican Party. I mean, it's been fun kind of watching them create this Tea Party monster that they're now dealing with. It's led to, I mean, a great example is in Kentucky, for example, with Mitch McConnell, who called it the worst piece of legislation, Obamacare, remember, most of which was developed at the Heritage Foundation, and they now hate it too, but that's another story. Mitch McConnell called it the worst piece of legislation in 50 years. Then, shockingly, when he wouldn't then stand up and say we're going to defund it because Mitch McConnell's all talk and realizes what shutting down the government could do, having a debt ceiling fight could do, he got this Tea Party challenge on the right, and he's got this guy saying to him, well, you know, if it's the worst piece of legislation in 50 years, why would you then not do anything possible to stop it? And this has happened in Tennessee with Lamar Alexander, and in South Carolina with Lindsey Graham, and House races. So what you're seeing is these guys have stood up and made it that the embodiment of all evil is Obamacare. People,
what it does is heightens this division within the Republican Party to where they're turning into this puddle of mush, and it's barely recognizable as a political party. But as far as this fight, the fight is being promoted by the right in ways that are just outrageously a lie. I mean, for example, telling students that they should not buy this insurance. You know that part of the story.
Yeah, well, but what they do is they're out trying to tell different students not to, because they don't want people who are younger, who are healthier, to get in Obamacare, to get into these pools, so that they'll drive the cost up. I mean, the way of they are trying to undermine a program. We need to remind people that was voted on by Congress, supported by the president. The Supreme Court still endorsed it and allowed it to continue and said, yes, this is constitutional. And then they reelected that president. The thought that they're doing what they're doing, what you pointed out with the students, is one thing, but a number of Republican senators and Obama was looking at different groups to help promote it so people would know that these healthcare exchanges exist. They sent a letter threatening the NFL not to promote it, that they would be taking a partisan stance. Just to let people know these healthcare exchanges exist. You've got
okay. Let me back up. Let's go one at a time here. Missouri. Okay, Missouri. They actually passed a law that says no official, any official will be barred from doing anything to put this law into place. In other words, they put a law on the books. Unions. You have Republicans refusing to support to smooth over parts of the laws that we know have to be smoothed over. The unions, on the other side of it, they're being left out because there's no attempt by either side to say, well, we need to include you in this in the way that we go forward. But this youth scam is probably the ugliest, where they're basically playing to the children, I mean, not the children, but to 18 to 25-year-olds in telling them, listen, you're bulletproof. You know, you're going to live forever. You're immortal. You don't really need this. Burn your card. Have you seen the burn your card campaign? What's behind that? What is behind that?
Again, in the end, look, they want this thing to fail, and if the healthiest individuals who are 18 to 25 do not end up joining Obamacare, they tell you, oh, you don't need it. I mean, they're telling them a lie that could hurt them, but in the end, they're making sure that the people that are more expensive are the ones who get into Obamacare. When I knew that we were going to talk about this story, you know, I read an article where Jason Chaffetz, who's this lunatic right-wing representative from Utah, who said that he will have his office not even answer people's questions. He'll just forward it directly to the Department of Health and Human Services. So I decided to give them a call and see if he would actually stand by that position, that when your constituents who need health care call you, you are literally to undermine in a partisan manner legislation that is passed. You are going to not answer their questions. And they couldn't answer in the office. They just said, well, we're not sure that's his official position. And I said, well, it's sitting right there in an article. And he's quoted, oh, well, we don't know. I mean, you know, they couldn't answer it. But that they're literally, I mean, I think I would call it in some manners treasonous, quite frankly.
Well, here's one thing they're doing with college students. They're saying burn your card because all this is welfare. And secondly, burn your card because if you don't, all you're going to be doing is supporting old people and you're going to have to pay the bill. Burn your card because even if you don't have coverage, you can go to an emergency room and get care anyway. Burn your card because if you became dramatically ill with some type of long-term illness, there's a way for you to get back into the program. That's a lie. There is no way for them to get back.
Well, they repeat these lies again and again. Like they did that with young people. They also have gone out generally and made these statements about, oh, you know, there's always the emergency room, and that's, you know, that you get care there, as if that is a sane, intelligent option for people, as well as something that's not more expensive in the end for all of us by having people wait until it gets to that level that they have to go and get. So, yeah, that, I mean, by the time you get to the emergency room, often you're going to die, quite frankly.
Well, and then there's that part when you get to the emergency room and they say, well, I'm sorry, but you have a cancer that has metastasized. Who pays for that?
Right.
How do
we all pay for it?
How do you get care? And in the end, maybe taxpayers pay for part of it, but the truth is these lies are actually taking effect, and you do have students burning their card, and you have Americans that so distrust government because it's been sold to them since the Reagan era that government is the problem. Now, the other side of that is they like to use roads that actually are paved. They want to use bridges. They love the idea of having Social Security. They like public education. They like the idea of having policemen. And when you point out, well, now let me back up and tell you, this is what government does, and you slap them in the head with just rational thinking and common sense to go, oh, yeah, I get that now. But it's easy to sell this to a young person who's being told, you don't need any of this. All you're doing is paying for old people if you put this in place.
A couple things in there that you mentioned that are extremely important, Mike. One of them is if they become experts at this generational warfare that you brought up. That's another way they've also tried to cut Medicare and Social Security. Look at how you're just supporting all the old people. That's a big claim that they make to try to, and it's not working according to recent polls because younger generations, the millennials, quite frankly, are far the most progressive generation at this point, and some pieces have been written lately about how our politics is going to move to the left because of them. So it doesn't work, but it doesn't mean that they won't start, keep trying.
Well, one part of it is, what is your take on how corporate media has covered this story? Honest to God, don't you want to simply just call in sometimes and ask these talking head pundits, would you explain Obamacare to me? And watch them just freeze up on the camera because they don't have a clue what Obamacare is. They don't know how it works. They don't know how people benefit. They have no idea, they have no idea how the economics of it even works. I mean,
Right.
aren't you tempted to sometime call in and say, you know, Mary, would you please explain to me how Obamacare actually works, and then watch them absolutely shut down right there on the television screen?
Right. Well, I mean, it angers you in so many ways because we have to put some blame with the Obama administration that has done a terrible PR job in selling the individual aspects of this that are all or mostly very popular. Obviously, saying to people that you can't be kicked off your health care once you need it, saying to people you can't be prevented when you've got pre-existing conditions, telling kids you can stay on health care, or I should say young people, till they're 26. These are all hugely popular, but on the right, of course, they've lied about all this. They said, oh, you know, they're going to make you pull the plug on granny, and there are going to be these things called death panels. And they've turned it into this evil thing like socialism, where most people don't know really what that means. They just know it's something bad, something that sounds anti-American.
But Cliff, isn't it? How do you answer the lies if, as a TV pundit, you don't even understand what the hell the program is about? And I promise you, I swear to you, 7 out of 10 of them that are talking about this story have really no idea of what the intricacies of Obamacare really is. Now, the other part of it that I think is remarkable, that it's almost like this has been completely left out of the narrative, is the people who are pushing this to destroy Obamacare are the people who sell insurance. You see, I saw an interview 2 weeks ago. All it took was 2 minutes to find out that person doing the interview on why, a proponent of why we should do away with Obamacare, why it's a bad idea. It took about 2 minutes to go online and figure out that he directly makes money by having Obamacare fail.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, Mike, and this is part of when you talk about the corporate media, this is part of a much larger problem. It's the same thing as when we have generals coming on saying we should go into Iraq, and you find out they've got investments in defense companies, or they sit on their boards. You know, we've got all these shows on Crossfire and this and that, where you turn something like this, the important questions, into just partisan warfare. He said, she said, without telling us that some of the people that are pushing some of these ideas, what are their interests? And as you pointed out, you've got plenty of people that have interests in healthcare companies, whether it's people that sell healthcare and want the prices to be higher because they benefit, people that are sitting on boards, have investments and the rest, and we don't get told any of that. Because
you know what?
In the end,
startling, 40% of the money coming to try to stop Obamacare is directly coming. When you follow the money, it's coming from the insurance industry that wants to stop it. And what they want to do is they want to sell big money policies with huge deductibles and argue that there's some kind of tax-free savings to a group to buying from them. And at the end of the day, what you have is you have an inability for the American public to really understand it, because the storytellers, the people on TV, could not, if I were to say, give me 12 points of Obamacare that you think are important for the average consumer. You could do that. I could do that. But if you compare what's out there in corporate media, how will the public ever understand what in the hell's going on? I have seen 0 stories on the connection between the people, the money behind trying to stop Obamacare, directly relating to the insurance industry. I've also seen no stories on the idea that people like Dick Armey have a direct interest in pushing this whole thing, because he builds up millions of dollars in profits by people joining his group. 16,000 members the last time I saw joined his group to try to stop this. He makes money doing that.
Right.
And I simply don't. About 30 seconds, what's the solution here? How do you ever get the truth out there?
Well, I mean, we need this. We need you. We need a vibrant, independent, progressive media, because in the end, the right learned a long time ago, if they can turn it into a debate, you know, he said, she said, right versus left, they can make it a tribal thing. Global warming doesn't exist. Gun violence doesn't exist. And this is what the right does. People on our side, we need to make sure the message gets out through vehicles like the one you have here, because people need to know beyond just the he said, she said, how legislation will help them.
Yeah, there are plenty of people that are willing to sign up for idiot organizations like the Tea Party, because they don't understand that it's simply moneyed interests that are putting them out there. Cliff Schecter, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. I appreciate it.
When we come back, we'll look at what happens to America's underclass when austerity measures are actually put into place. I'm Mike Papantonio. You're watching Ring of Fire. We're going to be right back.
Stand up, stand up.
Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. The sequester has forced mandatory budget cuts onto the American public, and the results are exactly what you'd expect. Republicans, they're making underprivileged Americans suffer at an alarming rate. I have attorney Howard Nations with me now to tell us about it. Howard, it's amazing the way corporate media has made sequestration look like it's really not a problem in America. It's just like, how are they missing the story of how serious this austerity is hurting us?
You know, Mike, Aristotle said you can judge a society by the way it treats its most vulnerable citizens. We're failing miserably in that. This whole business of stimulus versus austerity, cutting government spending as a means of controlling your economy, has failed in Britain, Spain, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Portugal. Stimulus has been used in the United States, hundreds of billions of dollars to the bankers, hedge funds, and corporations. Now austerity is being used. The cutting part falls on the poor. Americans, the states are now severely cutting social safety net programs for food for the hungry, aid for the orphaned and abused and neglected children, and education for the poorest children. The results are absolutely disastrous.
Howard, isn't one interesting part about it? See, to corporate media, that's not a story.
Right.
You see, it's not. Wall Street isn't being affected. We don't see that poor children can't get health care. We don't see that they can't go to school. We don't see that their food stamp programs being cut. They are the invisible minority that corporate media has never really cared about. Therefore, corporate media their talking point is, gee, what's the big deal? These cuts don't really mean anything.
From the bar at Willard's inside the Beltway, I'm sure this is not a big problem. But the fact of the matter is, in the states where sequestration has caused severe safety net cuts, in Kansas, for example, 18,000 people are coming off of food stamps because they have invoked the federal work requirement that you can't get food stamps beyond 3 months if you have no dependent children unless you have a 20-hour work week. However, they have 90,000 people unemployed. How are you supposed to meet a 20-hour work week when there's no job? That's Kansas. Oklahoma and Wisconsin are the next to follow. That will make 7 states that are following this program of waiving what they usually waive when there are no jobs, waiving that federal requirement.
You have Allison Kilkenny did a great job for The Nation magazine, and what she describes this is the hidden rot. In other words, we're not seeing it now. We're not seeing that we're not taking care of everybody. We don't see that we're not educating children, that we're not providing them opportunity. We don't see that now. Therefore, it's unimportant. But her position is that the rot is from the bottom that we don't even recognize. And what are some of the other things that are taking place as this austerity craziness continues under Obama's leadership?
Well, in addition to food stamp elimination, there's the child care and the kinship care. In Kentucky, for example, there are tens of thousands of child care and kinship care programs being eliminated, persons falling off the program. Child care, almost no new families will be added to the program, and the current recipients are cut if they, listen to this, if they make more money than the federal poverty level. $19,000 per 3-family household, then you don't get child care. Kinship care is even more important in some ways because that's a monthly subsidy where relatives take care of orphaned, abused, or neglected children. Plus they pay half of the cost of foster care placement. That's being eliminated and cut severely. Families rallied in Frankfurt, and Terry Brooke, who's head of the youth advocacy in Kentucky, said, the rhetoric about the effects of cuts has become reality. And it's not fair to say that we don't have money. We have money for bankers, money for General Motors, money for wars, money for anyone with a lobbyist. But there's no money for children's health care, children's protection, children's education.
Yeah, we were ready to spend $1.6 million per cruise missile over in Syria just about a week ago, and we're willing to land 400 of those. We're willing to spend $125 million a day simply to keep the support staff to be able to do all that. But we don't have enough money to educate our children. Howard, really quickly, how is corporate media again dropped the ball here? How is it that they've missed this story, and why have they missed the story?
Well, corporate media has missed the story for the same reason that the United States Congress has missed it. Congress has missed it because there are no lobbyists for these people, and these people are not they're not the objects of the corporate media. Corporate media is all about covering Wall Street. It's all about covering corporate America. Because it's owned by corporations. But for example, the Head Start program now eliminated 57,000 people. The view of corporate media on that is that, well, you know, Obama predicted it was going to be 70,000, so that's really not too bad. Seriously?
It's incredible. And the truth of the matter is, Howard, the American public doesn't know what's happening because they turn on the nightly news every day, and the nightly news is the same corporate message that if, you know, poverty doesn't matter, the underclass doesn't matter, all that matters is what's zinging up in Wall Street, what's happening inside the Beltway. Howard Nations, thank you for joining me, okay?
Thank you, Mike.
The chemical industry has made some friends in Washington, and they've been reaping some pretty serious benefits. Joining me now to talk about the fight against the chemical industry's toxic ways is Linda Lipsen, the CEO of the American Association for Justice. Linda, chemical industry is up to it again. They're trying to go to the Beltway and convince people like David Vitter and other politicians inside the Beltway that, there's no need to have strict, stringent state laws where a chemical company can be sued if they do wrong. Is that the way you see this new bill?
That's right. I mean, we need checks and balances in this country. We need to have a robust system of justice at the state level, and we need to have EPA regulating toxic chemicals. Right now, the EPA has only regulated about 4 chemicals out of 80,000, and that doesn't protect our kids, our parents, and America in general. So Congress is trying to do the right thing in trying to look at this program and trying to make it a more modern program. The problem is that, unfortunately, David Vitter came in, and in drafting a bill that would seek to do that, he wiped out all common law and all any kind of statute that the states have to protect their population. So
Linda, what that means to people watching this is if they have a chemical industry down the road from them, I think it's interesting because David Vitter, of course, lives right around the highest concentration of chemical industry, maybe in the United States, right there in Louisiana, where there are people dying by the thousands from chemical-related kinds of toxins. So, but what this means is Vitter wants to say that state laws don't have any effect on being able to fight that chemical company back, get them away from your children, get them away from your house, and see some justice. David Vitter says it's a bad idea for a chemical company basically to be sued in state court.
That's exactly right. And we all saw several years ago the Aaron Brockovich movie, and that was about a product called hexavalent chromium. That was in the water supply and that was causing cancers and all kinds of problems for kids and for their parents, et cetera. If no one is accountable, no one is safe. And the way the bill reads presently, that case would have been completely wiped out. And so we would not be protected from that product. So, what we're asking Congress to do is, yes, re-regulate the chemical industry, but in so doing, make sure that you have a robust a system of laws on the state level, and then make sure that you have you give EPA some teeth so that they can make America safe, and that's what we're asking.
Well, the awful thing about all this is if you have a family near one of these places that are putting toxins into the ground, into the aquifer, your children are drinking it, it's coming out in your sprinkler system. As the law is, you can still sue them in state court, and you have some remedies in state court that you may not have in the federal system. So what David Vitter wants to do is say, no, there's only one set of rules, and that's going to come out of Washington, D.C. Beltway, and if you don't like our rules, then you simply have to live with this poison that we're throwing at your family. I don't know how else you can possibly describe what David Vitter is up to. As I say, this is a different kind of prostitution for David Vitter because he's prostituting his office for the chemical industry. Isn't it? Isn't that what's happening here?
Well, that wouldn't be the way I would describe it. But this is a comprehensive proposal that would wipe out all these consumer protections that have been available all over the country. Take lead, for example, asbestos, formaldehyde, the product that you put into sippy cups. All of these products have been regulated somewhat by personal injury cases at the state level, and sometimes by attorney generals. And this is something that we want to see continue because once the case comes out, the information comes out that the product is dangerous, the public can protect themselves.
Well, you have the American Chemistry Council that is putting so much money behind this. They've hired lobbyists, armies of lobbyists, to try to convince inside the Beltway that, gee whiz, the chemical industry is doing their best, and they're always responsible, and no, they would never poison your aquifer, and no, they would never poison your family by what they put into the air. And the people listening to that surely understand how absurd that is. All we have to do is go back and look at the history of the chemical industry and understand they are not in this for the consumer. They're in this for the bottom line profit margins that they try to increase every year. And one way they do it is they go to people like David Vitter, and David Vitter becomes their mouthpiece.
EPA has to rely on the industry to come forward and to tell them that a product is dangerous, and that is just absurd.
Wait, in about 10 seconds. You're telling me the EPA has to count on the chemical industry coming to the EPA and saying, oh, by the way, the stuff we're making can kill you and your family, and if they don't get it from them, they just simply don't get it. Listen, Linda, this is critically important. I hope you're putting a huge effort behind it there in the Beltway. Push David Vitter back on this. Thank you for joining me, okay?
Thank you.
That's it for this week's Ring of Fire, but you can keep up with us throughout the week online at ringoffireradio.com or on Twitter at Ring of Fire Radio and on Facebook. I'm Mike Papantonio, and we'll see you next week right here on Ring of Fire.